I don't see, when you start making a false separation between biology, brain, emotion, and mind, you already, Descartes was wrong. He even realized toward the end of his life, he even acknowledged it, retracted it, but it was too late. The key is this. Your brain, by design, is a negative assessment machine. When our ancestors were on the African savannas, we were about this tall. We were very smart little critters, but there were still saber-toothed cats out there. There were still big bears, and they liked to eat us. And we were not big, we were not strong, didn't have cool claws, and we weren't fast. But what we did do is we had the ability of looking out into the future and having a negative assessment of everything. And behind every bush, there was a saber-toothed tiger. And we just built that into the way we perceive reality. Now, all grown up, you go into trading, any moment that you see uncertainty, what do you think's triggering? Negative assessment machine. Boom. Negative appraisal. Boom. You have to overcome that. And the big thing, your brain, from the African savanna to today, was never designed to separate uncertainty from fear. Biologically, your emotional brain, what is known as the limbic system, does not separate them. If you're going to be something beyond a smart animal and become fully human, you are going to have to change that, because it is the mindset that you bring to uncertainty that brings forth the probability that's going to happen. Okay? If you bring fear-based thinking into uncertainty, what do you think is going to happen?
You're going to get what you perceive.
Yeah, that's what happened to General McClellan with Lincoln in the Civil War. The guy was scared of Lee. And Lee was he was not a guy to tangle with lightly, but what happened is he finally got a hold of Grant. And Grant was not intimidated. And here we are today. Okay? What happens is your brain is going to organize you to avoid uncertainty. Do you see this as kind of stacking up against trading? You know? You create a comfort zone, and the moment that trading starts producing something that takes you out of comfort zone, there is a power to bring you back in, whether or not it's hesitation or what. Then, this is where it gets really tough, is the brain puts it in automatic patterns. It becomes familiar. It's put into the back of your mind. I don't use a word unconscious. I don't like that word. I think it is very non-descriptive of the phenomenon. But what happens is it passes beneath your awareness. It's still there. It's still lurking. The saber-toothed tiger is still lurking, whether or not the saber-toothed tiger lives or not. And you go in trading, and boy, I want to tell you something. You think that guy's out there everywhere. Okay? And suddenly...
I'm sorry. Does that mean, like, is that what they mean by hardwired?
Yes, that's hardwired.
That's what hardwired.
That's hardwired is, and fortunately, you're a human being. That gives you massive advantage over other sentient beings. Okay, and that's why you can learn to trade. Here's what I want you to grasp: is that your brain, this is the movement that happens. Uncertainty is, in fact, life. I don't know if you've noticed it. You know, we've thought everything, you know, everybody's in America, you got this home, everything's kind of fine, and everything's going to be fine, and all of a sudden we've blown up, and I don't know about you guys, but man, my retirement account has just been, you know, we were rebuilding it and all this, and it, what I thought was certain clearly is not certain now. And the illusion of control, the illusion of certainty has been really blown up. Uncertainty brings forth ambiguity. You know, there is a multiple choice test, and what happens is there is not a right answer. There are just answers that take you to different places. Oh my gosh, what do I do? Where's the certainty? What that does to the brain is it produces confusion. Confusion elicits in the brain. Now this is your mammalian brain. This is the one that we share with other social mammalians. Okay, and it's also the one that controls our thinking. Is the moment confusion occurs, unless trained, it automatically triggers to fear, and it will take on any explanation, even how bad it is, to get out of the confusion. And by the way, this is why in the Army, if you've ever trained in the Army or the Marines, and you know you're in there, that basic training, that's real gunfire, that's real machine gun fire in the simulated chaos of war, the reason they're doing that is they're training you to think clearly in the presence of death, the fear of death. That's what they're training you to, because they know, like for instance, if you stick me out there, my head's gonna get blown off. I don't want to learn that either. So there you go. So here it happens. The key is you have to interrupt that emotion before it hijacks your thinking, as our good friend the Hulk has here. Okay? You don't want to become the Hulk while you trade. And what you're doing is you are looking for the signs initially, just on a biological level. You can learn to observe what's going on in your emotional nature and your mind nature simply by observing what your body's doing. You have to do that, my friends. That's the first stage. When I'm working with people, that's the first 2 to 3 weeks of their work. And they're going, Randy, why am I? No, because there's no sense in trying to get to mine until you can manage this piece. So there you go. Now, in emotional regulation, what you're doing is you're actually interrupting the arousal and the motivational elements of that emotion we talked about. And what I do is I teach breathing and relaxation, because Herbert Benson figured this out in the 1980s, and all he did is studied yogas from the Hindu tradition, who had been doing it for 5,000 years, and he stripped out the spirituality and discovered, oh my gosh, these guys are doing diaphragmatic breathing and relaxing their body, and what they're able to do is they're able to manage the emotional state. Duh. And what's necessary is to be able to do it on like on steroids. I don't have 20 or 30 years to go to an ashram and get my body calmed down. It has to be done faster. So that's the first thing that happens. That's the emotional regulation. However, the problem is emotional regulation, being able to calm down, using all these really cool skills, that only gets you to the door of the mind. That does not change anything. It doesn't change the belief system that's driving the creation of your life. So then you go, wow, well, how do you get to the mind? Well, the Zen Buddhists figured this out about 2,500 years ago. And then you get to Harvard sociologists and psychologists like Kabat-Zinn, and he's teaching mindfulness. Fundamentally, what you're doing is with emotions calmed, you can produce mindfulness. And that, my friend, is the door. That's the door to transformation. Who has ever had the experience of kind of stepping back and reflecting on their lives and seeing things from a different perspective before? You have then produced mindfulness. You have then produced what is known as the observer of the self. Like in this illustration here, it is like sitting back watching a movie. In trading, in the way I teach psychology of trading, what you're doing is you're teaching a person to step back and to observe and recognize that you and your thoughts, you and your beliefs, you and your biases, all that stuff are not the same. Is that there is a part that is always witnessing this. And when you do that, life can change because you are no longer condemned to live in that pattern. You can move out of that pattern. So, with mindfulness, you're becoming aware of embedded issues, and you're beginning to develop a sense of observation. And this becomes really important because you begin to say, well, what's actually going on in my trading? Who in the world is doing this trading? And what you discover is that your brain, in adaptation, got born into circumstances, and what it naturally does, is it adapts you to survive in that circumstance. We generally call that family of origin. Okay? I don't like to do that because I don't want to hear the touchy-feely, oh, it happened in childhood. No, it happened while your brain was forming into patterns that kept you alive, and so that you could breed into the species again. That's my perception. That's the way I'm going to see it. Unfortunately, it locks you in. They go on automatic, you become blind to them, and there you are trading. And my friends, what I want you to hear is you do not have beliefs. Beliefs have you, and they are creating your experience all the time. You trade, and you see it manifest in all sorts of time frames. So, So ultimately, mindfulness is used as a tool. And now let's explain what that tool is actually going to be done. Because then you begin to observe the internal dialogue. Have you ever noticed that there's just a bunch of chatter? You know, you're walking down the street. Here in New York, nobody looks at you. And I was in Chicago last weekend at the Options Industry Conference speaking. And in Chicago, people look at you, they talk to you and stuff like that. And then next week, here I am in New York. Man, nobody looks at you. And yet what happens is I've already generated a story in my mind. And what I'm doing is I'm beginning to go, wow, there's an inner critic living in there. There's a harsh critic sitting in there. And there is this guy who has to be right. Gosh, I'm listening to an internal dialogue. I'm beginning to say, these are not just idle thoughts. No, I'm born into a history. They get embedded into me. And I become blind to them, and I just sink beneath the awareness. And what happens is I don't understand why I keep trading poorly. Well, you wake up. Or you can be like this guy. What we want to do is we want to find the hidden thought life occurring within you. Okay? Instead of living like this. And to do that, what I'm going to ask you to do, take your biggest problem in trading. Okay? Remember, the unique thing about trading is that you're sitting there in a room, most likely by yourself. You've got all these screens around you. There's nobody else there. All you hear is this hum. And what happens is you're alone with your thoughts. Has anybody had this experience? You're just alone with your thoughts. And there's a bunch of what ifs. What I want you to do is recognize in any internal dialogue there are two polarities. There is an inner critic part, and we will notice it by criticism, by judgment. That's the one saying you'll never make it. Don't do that. You're going to be stupid or something? What are you going to... And then there is this adapted voice that's reacting to it. If it's a victim, what happens is, oh, I might as well give up. It's a perfectionist. I'll do good. I'll show you. I'll prove to you. If it's a fraud, what happens is I'm going to lie to myself. I'm going to say I'm going to lose my house before I acknowledge that I have a problem. I've worked. They've shown up. Or a bully. I'm going to beat this stuff up. These are the adapted voices. None of them are what you need to be in trading. If you take this slide and you start listening to your thoughts and you start categorizing them, and you can go to my website, I have tons of articles that are free, you don't have to get into money or anything, you will start really realizing, oh my gosh, this stuff's happening in the mind. Yeah, it's happening in the mind. And here's the deal. Within all of us is this little character. It could be a parent, it could be a black form, it could be horned form, it could be any sorts of form. But the thing is you will hear this critical voice within the self. However, what this leads is something else, is that in the same way that there is this sense of destruction living within you, in the same way that there is a sense of fear living within you, there is also powerful elements of the self. I'm a really big fan of the Cherokee Indians. I consider them to be one of the most advanced civilizations that white men ever wiped out. And one of the things, there is a beautiful parable where a grandfather is putting his son down to sleep one night, and he's saying, grandson, within you there lives two wolves. One wolf is bad, and what happens if you follow that wolf? You will destroy your life and everything of meaning for you. There's also a good wolf, that if you follow that wolf, your life will have meaning, it will have purpose. You will find reason to live, and you will find joy in your life. There's silence. And the little boy looks up and says, Grandpa, which one wins? The grandfather looked at the child and said, the one you feed. And I want to tell you something, nowhere is it more on steroids than in trading. So, here's what I ask you to do. This is a huge leap for most people. The leap comes here is that if you begin to think of your mind not as a singular mind where I exist, but as a committee, like it's a boardroom. And in that boardroom, there is a fight of the direction of the company called you. you're the owner. There's only one problem. You've been asleep at the wheel and just taking checks, and it's gotten out of control, and you realize some bad guys have taken over the direction of the company, and what happens, the good guys, because they haven't been supported by you, really need help. And your job is to go in, bring a new sheriff in, and recreate that committee. That is the ticket. When you begin to do that, you begin to open up to the possibility that you can design the internal dialogue that creates your future. Because I can tell you this, the internal dialogue, that is the voice. Thoughts are the voice of your beliefs. Okay? They're not noise. They're the voice of your beliefs, and you need to become an observer of them, not like, oh, well, this is the belief that has seized me. Do I want this belief to be here? Is it effective in trading? And the key is, what we're about to do is we're going to find something that's already there. It just so happens within the self, and these are the elements that I work with traders to develop. They're going to have to develop the courage of a warrior. Okay? And I want to tell you, understand this, you talk with anybody who has been in hand-to-hand combat and has been in Iraq, what they will tell you, and they get this Purple Heart stuff, and they say, I don't deserve it. I wasn't courageous. They're right if you think courage is the absence of fear. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in the face of fear. It is the determination to push through something and believe that when you get to the other side, that the resources are going to be there for you to prevail. That's courage. The second thing is you're going to have to develop a ruler within the self. A ruler is not a thug. It's not Rambo. It's not a bitch. Okay? The Southern girls just have a really hard problem with the like New York girls. It's just, they just go, oh God, I love them. The key is, what it is, the ruler within you is the discipline. You will feel it as the emotional state of discipline. What it does is it rides herd. It keeps the committee of the self intact. It doesn't allow just the coming of the internal dialogue, the casting of self-doubt, the fear starts coming in. This is the part that rules. The next part is actually compassion. It's hard to believe. Tell me something. Who in here has ever beat themselves up when a trade has gone against them? Who has done it? One person's honest. One person's honest. So everybody has self-soothing skills that when you make a mistake, no, what happens is, and the truth is when you beat yourself up, do you think you're helping yourself? You're driving the fear deeper. That's all you're doing. Where you're never going to access it, and it's going to continually blow you up. That's what's called sabotage. What happens is when you have fear, the antidote to fear is self-compassion. Self-soothing. The way it shows up in your trading is patience. The fear's there. I was working with a guy the other day. He said, you know something, I was climbing this pole and I had to get on top of the pole 30 feet up in the air. And he says, climbing was easy. It was going, I've got to stand 30 feet up in the air on this stupid little 12-inch radius thing. He says, you know, I was scared and I had to soothe myself. And he said, you know, I just kept telling myself, you can do this. One step at a time. You can do this. You can do this. Caregiver. Encouragement. Okay? That's an element that already lives in you. It lives in you in the same way fear lives within you. The real key, have you developed it as a skill? Have you developed it as a part of the self? That is actively part of the trading committee. In trading, you will find out point blank at the level of your trading account. If you have, because the thing is you're going to take losses, friends. You're going to make mistakes. And the great traders become comfortable with losing. They become comfortable with making mistakes because they know that's part of the game. And it's not just words anymore. They talk the talk, they walk the walk. Then there's also an element of the self called impartiality, what Carl Jung and Carol Pearson would call sage. And if you've never read any of Carol Pearson's work, I really encourage it. It's Awakening the Heroes Within. She is a translator of Carl Jung that, from my standpoint, does a better job of doing Carl Jung than Carl Jung. If you've ever tried to read Carl Jung, I want to tell you something. It will put you to sleep. Just if you have insomnia, read Carl. Carol Pearson will show you the inner dynamics of the mind in a way, and it's the same system I use to talk about mind. The impartiality is what is called sage. When impartiality is there, you literally are logical, you are clear thinking, and you are making calculating decisions. Now, who do you think you want trading? The problem is the fear-based parts of the self is what in Carl Jung's work is called orphan. Okay? If you've ever experienced fear, that's orphan. And the moment orphan shows up and starts kind of like contaminating the trading committee, what do you think happens to sage, to impartiality? It's gone. So this is where emotional management has to happen. Those are the elements. And the way this looks is what I do is I take these energies, these archetypes, these inherent parts of the self, and what I do is I clue them into emotional states. They're more accessible, and we can get to emotional states a lot easier than we can these kind of far-off, weird concepts. You build the ruler as discipline, you build the caregiver as patience, you build the warrior as courage, you build the sage as impartiality, and that becomes the committee of the mind. The warrior defends, protects. The caregiver soothes. The ruler keeps discipline, keeps order. And that allows the sage to trade. And that, friends, is who you want trading. Now, how do you change the self? The truth is, a lot of empowerment systems like to believe that all you have to do is think positive and everything's cool. My promise to you, you think affirmations in the mirror. Who in here does that and recognizes that there's a little voice back here going, oh yeah? Oh yeah? You are going to have to fight that struggle. There's no way around it. It's been around since time immortal. One of my heroes, a fellow from Galilee, said in the Aramaic this: in this world you will find trial and tribulation, but take courage, for I have conquered the world. Now, what you're hearing is the mindset that the man brought into the struggle of life. He wasn't looking for a vacation. He wasn't looking for an excuse. He understood that he was going into a fight. And he brought courage with him, and it made all the difference in the world. Same thing here. When you develop these parts of your personality, understand what I'm telling you is these are inherent to you. They're undeniable. They're there. If you have a memory of when they were there, you have proof, living proof they're there. The only difference is, have you developed them? So, you transform the self-limiting beliefs. Instead of having the orphan going, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, what you have is you have a disciplined ruler that says, no, what happens is we're going to organize the self that's going to go into uncertainty. We're not going into uncertainty with fear-based. And suddenly what you have done is you have transformed fear-based thinking into probability-based thinking. And friends, the key is to think in probabilities. I personally use a process called symbolic representation or memory enrichment to get at these elements of self. In symbolic representation, those pictures I was showing you of the warrior fighting his dragons, of a ruler, people like many men that I know, when they saw the movie Gladiator and the character Maximus, it literally swelled in them. It swelled. They felt it. All that Hollywood only has 9 scripts. And all they do is say, okay, we're going to go after these archetypal images, and what we're going to do is we're going to find actors and actresses and stories that elicit those things and swell them up in you. The problem is you have to pay money and do it they don't teach you how to do it. They hook you in watching the movies. Memory enrichment, if you have a memory of a time that you produced in a time of challenge, You have the requirements there to produce discipline, you have the compassion, you have the impartiality, and you have the courage that you can mine and organize and bring into the awareness. It happened. The thing about a memory is it darn well happened. This guy that was sitting on top of the 30-foot pole, he may have wished he wasn't on top of that 30-foot pole. He was probably wondering why he paid $2,500 for the experience of being able to climb on a pole and then jump, by the way, and hit a bell. Okay? But the thing is it was something that really happened. They have pictures of him. It's a fact. There is no self-doubt. It happened. And what he's doing is he's now taking it and he's extrapolating that with a lot of training, I might add, and he's building that into a coherent state of mind. So it can be done. So here's the deal. You can trade out of your history, and where uncertainty and fear are still locked together, you can live in your self-limiting beliefs that your brain's already organized you into. Your comfort zone. It's comfortable, you know. And you can stay in impulse or fear-based trading. Or you can take mindful trading as a way. And here's the two things laid out. And you already know the other side. I'm going to talk about this side. Ultimately, when you take a look at that graphic down at the bottom, where what you're seeing is the ruler, the discipline living within you, is riding herd over a team. Okay? He knows who to call on. Like, if you're a ruler and you know, beyond any shadow of doubt, you're not going to pretend that the inner critic's not going to show up. You're not going to pretend that the fear's not going to show up. What you do is say, caregiver, go get orphan. Cool him down. Calm her down. Warrior, attack that dragon. And while that's there, okay, Sage, stay the course, stay the plan, give me the information I need to make a good decision. That's very possible. I see men and women do it every day. And these are fear-based traders that I started with. So, one, I thank you for coming. What I hope to do tonight is to give you hope, to be able to show you that this does not have to be crazy. It doesn't have to be blindly walking in a room thinking, well, maybe one day I'll run into some good luck. No, what happens is you build the mind. And it starts very simple with emotional regulation. It gets a little more complicated to get that mindfulness stuff going. Then you jump off the high dive and you realize, oh my God, you mean there's been stuff going on in my mind that I've been blind to and has absolutely been constricting the possibility of my life for decades and decades. And trading has been the gift that has forced me to face it. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. Then what you go is, well, if there's fear there, if there's criticism there, there's also, Rande is also saying there are these enormously powerful elements of the self that can also be developed as a working part of my mind. Yes, friends. Yes. Trading can give you that.